you need to ignore the statistical outliers, and that's always stuck with me. And I'm a big believer in good enough. How can I be smart enough to use tools and automation and techniques to get something that's good enough? And then just make sure that I can do it a lot over time. Be able to do it yourself very, very far is probably the best way to do it currently and probably also in the future.
Today's guest is Jakob. He's a Danish-Norwegian serial entrepreneur and music tech innovator. Born in Copenhagen, he now lives in Stavanger, Norway. Jakob holds a bachelor's and 2 master degrees in music production from Denmark's top conservatories. He started as an international songwriter, producer, and mix engineer, known for his meticulous craftsmanship. He later became head of A&R at Mantic Music Group, Scandinavia's fastest growing publisher. In 2021, he founded Amplitude Ventures, a music tech-focused venture studio and consultancy based in Norway. There, he co-founds startups, builds AI-powered MVPs, and helps founders raise capital. He co-owns 15-plus companies and has guided 25-plus founders to funding. His style prioritizes transparency, speed, and real profitability. Since 2023, Jakob has also been hosting the podcast Sound Connections, with more than 140 episodes thus far. He also pioneered the use of an AI co-host called AI Jake, and his show explores creativity, entrepreneurship, and the future of music. With deep creative roots and proven startup experience, Jakob is a trusted advisor and a unique voice on the global music tech scene. And now, dear friends, my conversation with Jakob. All right, welcome to the pod.
Thank you, man.
I wanted to ask you, because you have an interesting background. You transitioned from runner to hands-on music production in Copenhagen, then moving to Stavanger to found a venture studio. So maybe you can help me understand what made you make the choices along the way and help me understand how this journey unfolded for you.
You know, it's not well planned. I got diagnosed with ADHD 2 years ago, and I've basically, my whole life has been a mixture of being very hyperactive, over-obsessive, and then just learning things fast. Mm-hmm. So, we can go through a tiny bit more detail as of why, but I've always been a person to really go really deep into something and then either get bored or fail and then move on. But usually it's like in 5-6 year blocks or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah. So now I'm getting back into running, actually. So I'm still doing entrepreneurship, but taking up running again. So I think my story is interesting in the sense that it's poor way of doing things, but still resulting in like decent outcome. Yeah. Yeah.
How do you think the ADHD affects you from day to day and in your work? How are you able to catalyze that energy and that laser focus to propel you forwards?
Yeah, so I've always been able to do that. And, I've always been very good at things. I've always learned things really fast. And I've always have an interest of work. Never had like big interest in social connections or partying or anything. Like I've never had like a youth year or anything like that. I've just been straight into work.
Yeah.
So I've always been able to sort of just focus that energy on producing something. Always been my interest. I've never really had any other interest than performing. So yeah, been quite successful in at least directing my energy towards things I wanted to do.
And what made you go into music? I mean, this transition from like being a runner to, writing songs and recording those and then going into sort of the record industry, like how did that unfold?
I think as most parts of my life, it's not like super well planned. So I started running when I was 13, became good enough to, together with my team, like do national records in running, sprinting. So not good enough to be pro, but maybe like the tier right below.
Yeah.
And sadly got an injury when I was 17, a really bad injury. So I had like 4 years of where that was my life running. And, had hope that that was the path that I was taking. I wanted to go full-blown pro. In hindsight, I don't think I had exactly that, mostly, in my opinion, because of the circumstances. We were a small club. We didn't have any professional trainers. And ultimately, that's why I got a really, really big injury, like just, wrong training.
Okay.
So I just needed to do something. So again, I've always been, my parents are, the correct term would be some sort of workaholic, but not in a bad sense. Like they've always had passion projects and work, and they've always been full in. So my whole life being fully occupied has always been the reality.
Yeah.
So I was probably spending, running 20 hours a week and, all the surroundings around running, eating, training, studying besides school. So when that was left out, I just needed to put my energy into something else also, just to sort of get my sorrow away. So I started with music when I got the injury.
Did you go on a gymnasium or a college for runners or for athletes? Did you sort of, pursue it in that regard as well?
It was definitely the path I was trying to go. So I started with running a tiny bit too late to get into that. So I applied for those when I was 15, and I really had my breakthrough right after. So I went to like international, they call it IB, so international gymnasium. Yeah, so I've never sort of pursued running in that path. I never got to do it. So I started a tiny bit too late. I started a tiny bit too late with music. So even I started when I was 17 seriously, and I went full-time when I was 19. So, which also meant I never became like an instrumentalist, which is one of the very big requirements for making enough money in music. One thing is being good at writing songs and producing, but you also need to be able to perform music in order to make a sustainable living, which I never got to at that level.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of the money in music now is in concerts and merchandise rather than the licensing and so forth. A lot of artists are saying on Spotify, for instance, they put their music out there, they don't make too much on per track or per play. Is that
so
is that true?
There's not really money in music, full stop.
Yeah, okay, really.
So there's some money in being able to perform, but even that is very disproportionate with like the amount of time invested in the skills and anything. The level you need to be at to make like a normal living is extremely high. Okay. So you need to be like full-blown professional and maybe 1 out of 1,000 in order to make just a living. So like in any angle you see it from, music is not worth it from like a career perspective unless you are just fully into it.
Okay.
Yeah, so of course streaming and all that kind of stuff, there's nothing. The best way to describe the music industry, which I've worked a lot in, is it's a penny business. So just a whole lot of like small sources of income.
Okay.
And then if you're a business, you can represent a lot of people or other businesses that makes, mange bigge små in Danish, like a lot of streams of income.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So that's pretty bad industry to enter actually from a monetary reason.
Yeah, from a monetary perspective, yeah. Of all the things you could do after sort of your running career was over through this injury, what made you go into music as opposed to whatever else? I mean, the menu of things in the world that you could possibly do?
The simple answer to that is I needed something to just focus my time on, and I had sort of dabbled with music. My mom is a music teacher. I've never spent time pursuing music, but I knew the guitar decently, but that was about it. So it's just easy. And then I had a friend who made YouTube videos. So I was like, that sounds fun. So I asked my dad if I could buy a microphone and then a sound card, and I just started producing music. What happened there is, like, I've had a interesting emotional youth, like really difficult for me to connect with people, was very affected emotionally by many things. And when I found music, I found that sort of outlet.
Okay, to express yourself?
Yeah, express myself, but maybe like put my feelings in a box or something like that. So for me, it was really difficult to handle a lot of emotional things, being very sensitive. And it just gave me an outlet with music. So I think the combination of, like, I could focus on something, I could somehow harbor my feelings somewhere in songs. And then that was a new obsession. Like, that's why I pursued music.
Do you know where that sensitivity came from?
I think ultimately it comes from many different things, ADHD being one of them. So sort of there's many different ways that can express oneself. Mine is sort of overstimulated emotionally has been one of the big things. I'm less bothered by that now, but that's taken me 20, 25 years to sort of navigate.
Do you know how you've been able to navigate it? Or, I mean, is it possible to put into words?
I don't want to make it worse than what it is, but I've had an interesting experienced a lot of interesting things throughout my life, from my youth to grown-up life, where I've been exposed to a lot of extreme sides of life.
In how so?
So we spent a few years in our family in what you would define a sect, like a religious sect, which for me was difficult. Like it changed a lot about who I was, and it took me many years to sort of get back on track with my sort of self-perception of who I was. Now I can't even remember your question, but my path emotionally has been interesting, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And what was the whole family sort of deeply ingrained in that? Or?
Yes. So my family has been religious for many generations, and my mom and dad are entrepreneurial spirits that I'm also, and one of my brothers also has that gene. And I think they go all out on things, and they really try to sort of explore the limits of things in a positive way. But once in a while, I think that focus gets misplaced, and maybe naively so, which I've done also a lot, like where I pursue a path very intensely, and then sometimes it's a tiny bit too late, and then you sort of see the consequences afterwards. So I think my parents' intentions have been quite pure. Like they had a religious understanding, and then they wanted to sort of follow a group of people that are very much like, this is how we want to change the world for the better.
Yeah.
Ultimately, that turned out to maybe have a different side to it that had a lot of, consequences for people that weren't good as well. So I think my self-perception, maybe I'm exaggerating when I say, but I spent a few years being what I believe to be brainwashed. Yeah. And even when we got out of it, I was conscious of that, but still it took me time to intellectually separate my way of thinking for what I knew to be true, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So
I completely follow.
Like, for example, in some very, very religious Christian sects, like there's this thing about being in the world, but not of the world. Like, it's a separate entity almost, like especially chosen. And I knew that intellectually not to be true, but emotionally that was so ingrained through, what I define as brainwash. So it took many, many years to sort of get to resonate with people again. Not because I couldn't understand with people, I didn't necessarily judge people, but there was this subconscious feeling like I'm different and I'm elevated to some degree. And I tried to say that without any current guilt, but that was, intellectually I understood that not to be true. That, I'm just, equal. But sort of the background had made me default into a thought process. And back to your question, it's taken me a lot of reflections and discussions, both with my wife, with like mentors, with some therapists. I'm more keen on mentors, if that makes sense. Yeah. To talk through these things. So, and I think that's where I've found a more emotional balance, because I've spent proactively probably 10, 12 years just talking about it with the few close people I had around me. Yeah.
And when did that sort of end, that era or that phase?
It's pretty short sprint, so it was like 14 to 17. So around the same time that sort of I lost running, we also lost that sort of environment.
Yeah, so two things breaking at the same time.
Yeah, and there was also the financial crisis at that point, where sort of my parents on the bad side of that. So it was really much everything got disrupted. So
oh wow, yeah, that must have been a chaotic time.
Yeah, I think our life has always been interesting. So I don't think I reflected that much upon it. Like it's just we've moved a lot, we've explored things. My parents have always done like really cool extreme things. So
can you give some? What do you want to sprinkle a few examples?
My dad has been chairman of foreign aid organizations, and been flying over with helicopter war zones and bombs being dropped. Or my mom was a lot in television as a politician. She's been at the parliament sitting as party secretary. She's been starting her own school. So she started a homeschool for me and my brother that grew into 100 students. So like,
oh really?
A lot of those stories.
Oh yeah. Wow. That's a lot of fascinating stories.
Yeah, and there's plenty of those, like 10, 20 of these sort of small entrepreneurial pursuits that never sort of took any financial gain. Yeah. But like, it was a very entrepreneurial lifestyle. So I don't think I felt those changes that much per se. It's always been the extremes.
Yeah, it's like all these side quests of life.
Yeah, you can call it side quest. I think that's a good description.
Yeah.
So I've always been exposed to that. I think it's also why I'm this type of a, I'll call it a chaotic entrepreneur. Like I've gotten definitely more structure of it after I got kids and much more intention. But like I'm a structured person, but in the long perspective, I'm very chaotic. Like in the way that I'm more of an inventor type personality than a stable entrepreneur. So trying to make that work is, a lifelong pursuit, I guess. Yeah.
Oh, very fascinating. I think that there's a lot of strings to potentially be pulled later on there. But coming back to sort of your music endeavor, songwriter, producer, you also worked for a Mantic Music Group in A&R at some point.
Yeah, so that was a company I started. Yeah. So I've started too many things. Luckily, a lot of these things has continued without me. So like the entrepreneurial side of music, and so I started producing music, went full-time, opened my own music studio. I was 20. So I moved to Copenhagen, I was just like, I'm going to work for myself. So I opened a music studio and lived from that full-time. I didn't have any side income, so I guess I made things go round. And then I just went into that and got into probably the most competitive music school in Europe, RMC, in Copenhagen, and then into the Danish Royal Academy as well afterwards. And then I've just been starting these companies. Like when I opened the studio, I also opened a record label. The first artist I produced and released, we happened to have #1 hit in Denmark.
Oh, wow. That's pretty
on
cool.
radio for 5 weeks. So
how did that come about? Because sorry to interrupt, but I just feel that there's, I have all these questions.
Yeah.
And I feel that, having the dream or wanting to start something is one thing, but then starting it and then sort of making it work as well is a different thing. So when you start a music company or a record label, and then suddenly you have, successful artists that you're putting out, like there's a leap between the two. Like help me connect the dots. Like how do you build it up that quickly, and how do you learn to navigate that space quickly?
So for me, starting something and executing on the first steps of something has always been second nature. It's been very, very easy for me. So I don't really have a formula. Like I just hyper-focus. So when I opened the music studio, I was doing, no lie, I was doing 80 to 100 hours per week just doing music. So recording artists, doing live sound, producing people, songwriting. It was 16 hours per day just working. And when you're, somewhat smart and fairly good at networking, you can get early success fairly easily in most things you do. The networking thing for me is very particular. So I don't have a lot of deep relationships. I've never worked that way. Some would argue that I'm probably on some sort of spectre there. So I don't really connect very deeply with people. But for me, it's a game. So I'm really good at seeing, first of all, the hustling. So just really be on. So connect with people for the sake of, it's good to know you because there might be some connection that we can use for later. And I just do that at scale. Like thousands of people. I have a pretty good memory, so I remember people and know where to place them most of the time. So it's just a part of the game, I guess.
So good with names, good with faces, good with remembering conversations.
Yeah, and then I think, not to speak myself down, I can also be fairly manipulative, sometimes in a good way, where I can see synergies and maybe push people in that direction. Don't you think this? And they're like, yeah, sure, okay, then let's do this. So I've used that a lot in my businesses. The problem is sustaining things.
Yeah.
Again, back to that inventor type. I get a lot of stimulus in starting new things. Many parts of my journey has been being the first at something, and also creating a lot of attention around it, but then not sustaining it, which is the path I'm trying to take now. After
building some systems around it to sustain it in some way, or some structure,
or committing, and not relying on the stimulus. Life is more than the excitement. It's the repetitive, boring thing is actually where the value is. We can consistency go into this. The first things in my life where it really showed itself is I started a podcast 2 years ago, a bit more than 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. And at that point, been part of starting many companies, venture studio, and my business partner now that I had just hired at that time, he was one of the hires I did almost 3 years ago, he's called Taj. He's much more qualified than me. I don't know why he wanted to work for me, but I think he found it interesting. He just moved from India to Norway, so.
Yeah, how did you guys meet?
He was doing volunteer ticketing in Folken here in Stavanger.
Okay.
Because he just, he quit his founder life in India, moved with his wife to Norway. She got a great job, so he was just exploring. So that was very randomly. And then he thought, okay, this guy, he has something. He's a tiny bit insane, but I'll come and work with him like 20-30% precision. But he said to me, just try to stick to this podcasting. And I remember I had if it ever, my most ambitious dream I can have is it has 10,000 subscribers and it has like 1 million views. And then that was an unimaginable goal. And reality, I haven't really done anything. I've just released an episode per week. And now it's just grown so big that we arguably is probably the largest music industry podcast in the world. Soon 2 million views and 20,000 subscribers. And it's just growing. It's, getting bigger and bigger guests now. My last guest I had on was a unicorn founder in the music industry. And that's the sort of the caliber of guests I'm getting on now. So
yeah, that's amazing.
So back to consistency. So I'm trying to practice consistency now, just repeating boring business over and over again. And then you can iterate and innovate over time when what you have is stable and have someone to take care of that. So yeah, I can't abandon the need for stimulus completely, but I need to do it in grown-up steps.
Yeah. Now, how would you say that you and Taj complement each other?
So it's actually quite interesting. So back to my childhood, it's a long-winded answer, but I'll get to it. I, as a part of, not necessarily brainwash, but a part of my self-understanding at that point was that I always thought I was really good at reading people. And it came from a religious understanding of, the eyes is I'm misquoting this, but the eyes is like a mirror of the soul kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I was very convinced that was true, that, I could, speak with people, have a very good sense of who they were. That has proven to be the most untrue thing about me. I don't know how to judge a person. I just don't know. I'm either overconfident in their abilities, in their integrity, or I completely misread them, or I have a negative assumption about a person and I choose to be completely wrong. Historically speaking, provingly, I am terrible at judging characters and people. And it's, very difficult for me to swallow that camel because it's always been my self-understanding that I was really good at that. Maybe because I'm charismatic and I'm pretty good at, again, back to the word manipulating or steering people into a direction. I thought that of myself, and I don't. And Taj is brilliant at that. And 9 times out of 10, I disagree with him. And 9 times out of 10, he's right. on pretty much anything. If it's business consequences, strategy, people. So that's basically it. I have the ability to sell. I have the ability to communicate. And he has the foresight that I don't have. Obviously, there's, a lot of practical nuances to that, but that's basically it. So we work really well together because he's patient and he has foresight. And I have neither of those. So it's very fundamental opposites.
Yeah. So you really complement each other, I would say then, yeah.
I think he compliments me and he accepts the challenges of that. That's in all honesty. I'm really difficult working with. I'm a pretty bad boss. There's a lot of negative things about me, and then there's a lot of positive outcomes around the things that I do. But I've come to accept the fact that it's going to cost a lot of people to work with me, but I'm most likely going to be able to provide a path a lot of other people cannot do. So if I'm more clear in communicating that trade-off, then it tends to go better.
Basically, you have to break a couple of eggs to make an omelette.
Well, yeah, sure. You can point that picture, but yeah. But I've been poor at expectation setting in the past, which I'm better now. Not perfect, but better. Yeah.
Are there some skills from your time working with music that are transferable into talent scouting, building the organization in Amplitude Ventures and looking for promising startups?
Definitely is. I think the biggest change I had in me that I carry now, hopefully for the rest of my life, is when I was doing my bachelor's when I was 24. I was writing about how to open oneself in creativity.
Okay.
Which have always been difficult for me because I've been, inherently judgmental because of my extreme religious upbringing or the stint of time where I was. And even though I was really good at making music and creating, I was never good at like that full expression.
Yeah.
And, if you talk with a person who's studied art or spent the time of art, there's, this, in Danish they say the huligem, there's you have a connection, like some sort of connection to creativity. Like, it doesn't even need to be spiritual. It can also be just neurological. You're receptive for creative ideas and impulses in a way where it's free-flowing.
Yeah.
So in the process of writing that bachelor's, I found that. Like, I found a way to open up for new ideas. And in reality, the biggest thing is you get really fast. Like, really fast at understanding things, really fast at sensing things, really understand of creating ideas and pathways. If one door closes, you'll just find another door. So the creativity of that aspect was the biggest learning from music that carried over. So as an entrepreneur, like 90% of my job is navigating problems.
Yeah.
And shit.
For sure.
So I use
the
that
things
skill
that other
set.
people can't solve sort of crops up to you in a way. I mean, if you think about escalating problems, you always end up with the worst problems that nobody else can solve, I guess.
Yeah, we end up also creating problems for myself.
Yeah, that's another story, I guess. But yeah.
but being able to handle that and not just get a blocker. Like, again, if you're trying to express yourself through songwriting, like it's all about, regardless of how you feel, can you make something?
Yeah.
And so it really doesn't depend on external motivation. Like, again, I mentioned, and we can talk a tiny bit about it, like I've taken up running again. So it's always been a long lost dream of mine. It's been a big sorrow that I lost running. So I've taken up very, very seriously. So currently I'm running like, not enough, I think, but like 10 hours a week, like 100 kilometers per week. So I want to run a lot more.
How do you feel that affects your creativity or sort of flow of ideas, or is there no connection there?
Well, there is some connection, but my main point I was trying to get to is I don't need the external motivation. Like, it's, you can create the inspiration just by unlocking. Like, when I speak, I go to Rune Løbelag, run club, and people talk about, it's so hard getting out of the door. Like, it's not even crossed my mind. Like, I'm going running.
I'm doing this, yeah.
So I think it transfers a lot to your life where you're not dependent on the situation to open up. You just open up.
Yeah.
Like, this is what I'm doing, regardless. And you can find enjoyment in the moment, like, really quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so less so a victim of, the drive.
I think at least the association I get is sort of a lot of people overthink things. They start things in their mind, but not in reality. And I think one of the ways to get out of your mind and get out of overthinking or thinking too much about something is taking action. And if you just have this action bias, if you take action immediately, then learning and finding your way and iterating and everything comes after that. And the less you're in your mind, the more you're out in this world taking action, the more effective you'll be, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's true. In my case, it was too much of that. So, and that's back to the sort of the stability thing that I'm working on, is not taking action, because taking action has never been my issue. If anything, it has been the issue. So taking too much action. So now I'm trying to be much more inactive. And when I have a thought, not reacting to it. If I have a gut reaction, not reacting to it.
Yeah.
It comes back to, so that I believe that I have an inherent bad sense of the situation, like a poor sense of the situation. And if I allow it to prove itself over time, then I'm in a better position to make a good decision about it.
When a new idea comes into your mind at this stage, do you sort of store it away somewhere, or like write it down and catalog it? Or do you like send it into the organization that you built, that we will talk about a little bit more, for them to explore it? Or how do you deal with it?
Yeah, so I usually think about it for a few days or a few weeks, and then I ask either my business partner Taj or my wife, and if they say no, I abandon it.
Okay, yeah.
I have plenty of ideas, and if just one of them says no, then it's it. I just abandon it. And if it keeps on creeping on my mind, I'll ask again. But I'm becoming more and more lenient on people that I trust to make those decisions for me.
It sounds like a healthy filter.
Well, I think it's a necessary filter for me. It's the realization that just historical proof that if I don't make the decisions based on my own conviction, then it turns out better. I might be missing some opportunities, but heck,
Yeah, overall, it's a better way to steer.
Yeah.
The other thing that was really on my mind when you were talking about this bachelor that you were doing in Copenhagen, and while you were doing it, you sort of had this, let's call it an epiphany on in terms of creativity. Is it possible to put it more into words or to describe like what happened and what did you sort of learn from it?
Yeah, I think there's two aspects to it. One is the intellectual part, another one is the bodily point. So again, growing up where I judged a lot of things, either intellectually first, but then also emotionally afterwards, I think it's really difficult to open up, like when you're judgmental of other people, judgmental, I don't like EDM. So why don't you like EDM? And going into understanding why are you reacting like this? I had as many musicians have, which is totally misplaced. They hate some sort of genre.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so for example, there was a part where I hated EDM, and why did I hate EDM? Well, I felt like it was, cheap. It was, there wasn't real musicianship. But when you understand EDM, it's that's not true. So what was the actual reasoning? Well, the actual reasoning was probably my, background's perception of, clubs or drinking alcohol, which was a clear association with that kind of music. So it was judgment of a lifestyle that sort of projected itself over to a music genre.
Exactly, so it seeps into there,
Yeah, and the most natural, reflection I've been I don't believe it's good music, but in reality is I don't condone the lifestyle of the people that I associate with the music.
Exactly, yeah.
So that was one sort of intellectual separation, just calling bullshit on myself.
Yeah, where's this coming from?
Yeah, where's this coming from? So understanding that. So that was the intellectual part. That was just one example, but, for example, I had the same thing with jazz. So why didn't I like jazz? And it's just well, it's too noisy and doesn't have relevance. But in reality, it's just because it was a pursuit of, if you really want to go into jazz, a lot of people, it's the full pursuit of self-expression, which for me probably was in fundamental contrast to the religious of full pursuit of God, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And some might argue, a lot of jazz players had that similarity. It's full pursuit of self-expression through energy and universe and maybe even God. But for me, it was wrong. Not wrong in a sense, but I had this subconscious, it's wrong.
Yeah.
And then the bodily thing is when you realize these things and you can separate your opinions and judgments to what it actually is, which is probably just judgment, then it allows you to, I'm not an expert in expressing this, but to open up for inspiration, just being neutral or accepting or receiving end of ideas.
So that whatever comes up. So
yeah. And not judge things in the moment. So for example, in a lot of creativity, especially in songwriting, if you are in rooms with writers that are judgmental, oh, I didn't like that idea, that oftentimes is very limiting for the creative process. There needs to be space for bad ideas. There needs to be space for oh, this is what I wanted to do, and then you do a full pursuit of that, and then no, that didn't work. But then when you say no, that didn't work, it's more I pursued that was great, but I think there's something better.
We can dig more.
So so it's the bodily thing of opening up, and it's actually a physically bodily thing. You can feel the difference when you're receiving. For example, a lot on the podcast that I do, I'm a very different persona, maybe even now, than who I am in my full-fledged person, just because I'm trying to be receptive. I don't do that at all times because that takes so much mental energy. And it's also a very vulnerable place to be. You cannot be vulnerable at all times.
Now, I associate what we were just saying with sort of being in this green zone. Like there's no criticism in the green zone. You can be in the red zone or the green zone. And some terminology I've been sort of, I guess, familiar with in the past. And yeah, it really resonates. I mean, you want to be in the green zone to be creative, and then you can always judge it later on. Like, okay, what came out of that zone? And you can be sort of in the red zone and criticize it and figure out, how do we take it forward, or do we take any of this forward? But mixing criticism and overly too much feedback in the green zone, then you kill the creativity, and people lock in, and they're not vulnerable, as you say, and you're not sort of exploring wide enough ideas or being crazy enough in that pursuit of trying to create something.
Yeah, by the way, like one of the things where, let's say if people sometimes perceive artists as being a tiny bit crazy, it's because they are in that zone so much. And in reality, that is almost the definition of crazy. Like it's sort of this loss of sense of reality, which oftentimes is almost needed in order to be such a genius expression person.
Create something brand new. I mean, creating something brand new is really difficult.
Yeah, so it's open all the time for a lot of these people, and that's also why it's so demanding, why some of them are sort of turning to drugs and other stimulants or relationships, and just because it is so difficult to navigate being in that space at a prolonged time. And oftentimes you need a lot of other things that might not be healthy long term in order to sustain that.
I can see that being
people maybe lately, the last decade, has been better at, going towards little alternative methods like, self-exploration, meditation, health, which ultimately I believe is better than drugs and relationship fulfillments and such.
Shifting gears a little bit back to sort of the Amplitude Ventures venture studio, I'm also quite curious if you can sort of elaborate a little bit more on the filtering mechanism of finding promising startups. How do you sort of separate the good from the bad in your perspective?
Yeah, so a tiny bit of context. Amplitude Ventures is a venture studio. I try to describe it as a company that built other companies. So we help founders, everything from an idea to commercialization. So you can have everything like, I want to build this, to we help you build it. So technology-wise, sales, fundraising, getting investors, partners, the whole thing, to like, now I'm in the market, I'm making money, I have customers. So that's sort of what we specialize in. We've done a lot in music and music tech, but we do a lot in other industries as well.
What would you say is like the percentage between tech and music tech? Or is it mainly tech? The other, maybe I'm making an assumption here. But
so our revenue is probably 75% not music tech, but our projects are probably 75% music tech. So it
speaks to the profitability of.
So we do a lot of music tech because I believe there's a long-term gain to be had. But, it's not a big part of our sustainability in our business. So we have a lot of non-music tech projects that pays the bills.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But everything is tech, right? Just to clarify that.
Pretty much everything is tech.
Yeah. And would it be software as a service companies mainly, or other things as well?
Yeah, we also do. We're involved in a few hardware companies and such.
Okay, really? Yeah.
So, but again, we're a supportive actor, and sometimes we're like very, very hands-on. Sometimes we're a supportive actor. So if it's outside of our expertise, we usually support. If it's inside of expertise, we're, very hands-on. I have a very particular way of working with people. In its most fundamental nature, I try to be as direct and rude as possible and see how they react.
Mm-hmm.
So I can be cutthroat rude. Well, rude in the sense that I'll speak to what I believe to be the statistical and academic truth. I'll never say something that I say just to be prerogative.
So rather than rude, it's radical candor. Like you're super honest.
Well, it's in the eye of the beholder, but at least from my perspective, it is extreme precision on my opinions and why they are my opinions, and I can point to the numbers as a why. And then I see how do they react. And, 7 out of 10 people react poorly. 3 out of 10 react positively or, something on that scale. And that usually tells us this is a person who is able to be challenged and adapt. And we try to not make any statement that we believe this is the truth. Like, this is why we believe you're wrong, and I'll explain to you why. So that's basically our sort of mechanism of finding people we want to work with. We get a lot of, like, we wouldn't call enemies in the process, but we've got a lot of people that does not speak kindly of us, which I don't really care. There's enough people in the world to work with.
So quickly figuring out whether they're coachable and whether they sort of have a growth mindset and they're interested in feedback, also harsh feedback. That's one of the first filters, basically.
Yeah, I'll be very careful with using the word coachable, because I don't think that I'm a person that should coach anyone. But I'm challengeable, maybe. Yeah, I can definitely challenge you. But, you don't need to do the path that I've done.
In terms of type of companies, do you both look at those that are pre-revenue and those that have, specific numbers for MRR and ARR, for instance? How do you go about it? Do you have both categories? Or?
Yeah, we do. So we have, companies we've also been with for a while that was just an idea. So had nothing, to now being very, very promising, working with big companies. So we do mostly like B2B, like, business.
Okay, mostly B2B.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, almost exclusively. So yeah, we do the whole spectrum. And we're more looking for the founders that we would like to work with. Again, working with the premise that, both me and Taj are not great to work with. Like, we're not, how do you say this? We're not kind. We're not that interested in being the most nice person to work with. Like, we're both like cutthroat, like win it to win it. And we're looking for people who not necessarily have the same mentality, but can thrive in that environment, and where we can provide value while being that, like, staying true to ourselves. I think it just comes to the sort of past failures of trying to adapt to people. Like, here in Stavanger 2 years ago, we were 26 people in the venture studio that completely crashed that model. And now we're, 60, but we're digital. That sort of thrives a lot more. So for me, it's always been really hard to figure out how to work with people. So if I'm like, this is how I am, do you want to work with this and take the value, and you can navigate that, then that's good. So we're working very much on our own premise, if that makes sense. And it's much less so trying to adapt to others than like, this is the reality. If you want the value we can provide, this is what you buy into.
The funnel of these companies, where does it come from? And are there some areas also geographically that they mostly are coming from this geography?
Yeah, so we work a lot in Europe in general, and we're doubling down on Norway. But in general, I've always been an outbound guy. Like, I don't wait around for people to write me. There's plenty of people that write me, but I'll always 10x outbound than what we have inbound. So I think, we probably reach out to, 20, 30 founders per day.
Yeah. And how do you go about doing that?
Yeah, so I have a team for everything. I don't do much, really, other than sales. So, for example, let's be practical. So let's say we sort of ran through our numbers 3 months ago and had a good like dashboard we built and like where it's all our deal flow, where does it come from, recurring versus new, and it's very clear that there's a very specific ICP in Norway. So Norwegian founders of a specific type, like that's where we have the most success, and that's also the continued success we're probably going to project. So like, okay, let's find those. So we just had a team, so a sales team, just work on like, let's find as many of these companies as we can. So like hundreds, and let's start to connect with them on LinkedIn.
So mostly through your LinkedIn, yeah.
Yeah, LinkedIn is a really good thing. Like, I have a fairly established brand, like 10,000 followers. So it's not big yet, but like decent, and like been very active throughout the last 3 years and had a lot of reactions to my material. So it's like a fairly credible lead place. Yeah. And again, like back to, I remember people really well. So I remember conversations I've had 2 years ago. So it's not like just mass output. It's just when I have a conversation, at least if they were somewhat interesting, like I'll remember you. So it's a very scalable thing. And then my team does that. So I luckily have a PA that also sort of oversees my LinkedIn and my inbox. I also do it myself, but then she always makes sure that there's at least some sort of consistency in my replies and such.
Yeah.
Yep.
Do you use automation at all in that outreach?
We do to some degree. So I've been very AI progressive for a while, like all the way back to 2019, 2018, when I first sort of started with my insights into machine learning, and then with this new wave of, AI came in, 3 years ago.
Yeah.
I've always been very forward leaning. I'm seeing a lot of limitations in automation, but so I would like to say yes of the basics, but it's still not come to a point where there's a lot of like meaningful tools in automation. Obviously, we use it for the basics, like, video editing and graphic design and all these tools that can sort of assist you doing things more effectively. Like, LLMs I use all the freaking time, but use them smartly and the right models.
Do you use it also as part of the outreach? Like, I know at least there are some certain tools you can connect to LinkedIn for sending messages, and if people reply, then there's a set message for the second message, and there's a set one for the third and the fourth, and if they say yes, and there's a different path and these sort of things.
We do that, but manually, because the problem with AI and automation is things get so not personal, and we don't want to do that. Like, it's nuances. Like, I obsess a lot about writing, so I wouldn't call myself a writer, but I'm a pretty good, like, producer mentality. They give you the oversight. And if just one sentence or one word is wrong in a sentence, for me, like, that throws me off. And I know that people subconsciously is also there. Like, people who are somewhat progressive in their job, they know how to spot lack of, there's not a person here, or this is like me being reached out at scale.
Yeah.
So
you can very often pick that up.
Yeah, and it's like nuances. And so I try to stay away from that. So we do that, but manually. So we have like templatized things, like this is how we would normally reach out.
Yeah.
But then I, technically speaking, for example, on purpose, have a tiny bit of a spelling mistake. So on purpose have like less than optimized sentence structures, or do it very simply. Like, the first reach out is, hey, thank you for the connection. That's it. I'm not selling anything. So I think a lot of it has to do with how's AI automation doing it right now, and then do the opposite. So it was always steer away from the trends. Like, don't touch the trends. Do something that's slightly close to it, but very differentiated. And do that at scale instead.
Oh, yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, because these things are just, they get streamlined so much. Like the whole concept of, LLMs is they're scraping data. So it just gives this very like streamlined, the best of everything, kind of like mediocre medium.
Now that we're speaking about Amplitude Ventures and how you do things, maybe we can also talk a little bit about the organization, sort of where you're located, because it's very virtual organization, but you do have some layers and structures. You have some different teams. Maybe you can sort of speak to that.
I think it requires a tiny bit of context. So when I obviously have been starting companies since I was 18, and always been fairly successful at starting something and having like immediate impact. And then when I came to Norway, I helped some guys here locally to start a music company while I was just finding my footing here. I think that's 5.5 years ago. And that sort of, I found more and more interest, so I joined full-time more or less and just helped it build up. That then turned into a venture studio where we, open music companies, music technology companies, and very ambitious locally, and started to go internationally with our efforts. And I built up this very like, and together with the co-founders, this very like friendship based, like bring in your friends. And that's why we grew to 26 people without anything significant revenue. We had revenue, but invested capital. People got paid like, almost nothing, but they got compensated a tiny bit to work with us. And then built out this very flat structure thing where I was clearly like the leader, but it was very like democratic kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I just don't know how to navigate it. And ultimately, long story short, it fell apart. There's many reasons. But one of my biggest personal reflections is like, I don't know how to navigate utilizing relationships as the driving force.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how to be a good boss that's emotionally present for you and all the kind of things. And so what's going to work? So when we needed to rebuild the company, we went down to 3 people. Yeah. And needed to rebuild it again. We happened to be the digital path being the most viable one. So we have a completely remote company, depending how we count it, like we're around 60 people. We have a lot of people, some in Europe. We've had people in India, where my business partner from, and then we have a lot of in East Africa as well. So Ethiopia is one of our big countries. It's probably the most promising country in the world right now for digital talent.
Could you speak to why that is and why East Africa turned up on the radar? Just a small tangent.
Yeah, I think first of all it was a tiny bit random. So we were trying to look for we hired a Norwegian person for like an AI job, and there wasn't a good culture fit. So I just needed to find a new person.
Yeah.
And I was looking everywhere, LinkedIn, sites, blah, blah, blah. Ended up finding a guy in Ethiopia.
Yeah.
I had no intention. That was just the most qualified guy. And then I figured out, so what should I pay him salary? And I did a lot of research and like, do you want this? And then he said yes. And like, oh, that was affordable. Yeah, and then we figured that out. I just hired a new person from Ethiopia and then build and build and build.
Yeah,
so it's kind of random
from there. Yeah.
Yeah. And luckily Taj has, being from India, and he's worked sort of at these outsourcing companies, technology companies before for big global brands. He sort of knew a lot about what to do and what not to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we built that, and now we have like a pretty hierarchical structure. So there's a lot of hierarchy. So obviously I have my board, and then me and Taj, and then we have like 8 teams and team leaders, and they have their project leads, and then they have like usual workers. So like 5-layered hierarchy.
Yeah. So basically, board, you and Taj.
Yeah.
And then
team leaders.
Project managers or team leaders?
Team leaders, yeah.
Team leaders, and then the teams?
Then we have team leads, like project leads. So
Yeah.
people who's responsible for delivery.
Yeah, okay.
And then we have people who are supporting.
Who do the delivery, yeah.
Yeah, who's supporting, yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, and it's very like strict. Like I communicate with some of the team members directly on deliveries, but that's more about the actual outcome. But it's a team leader's team. Like it's not my team. Like it's your team. So you figure it out. And if you need support from me, you can reach out. But which means like we can be, we've scaled a tiny bit down because of effectivization and the market right now. But I think we were the largest 90 people, and I didn't really have much interaction on a day-to-day basis on people because that I needed to as the boss.
Yeah, this is why we have hierarchies.
Yeah, it's very un-Scandinavian. It would never work here. Never. But for us, that's been, in order to build a lean team that's effective, that's sort of how we needed to build it. And culturally speaking, that was more appropriate there than here.
That totally makes sense. And also in terms for, a cost perspective as well, to be able to get margins in this kind of market.
Yes, so the clients we have and also the companies we invest in, they don't have money. Like, startups don't have money. Like, if they have a lot of money, maybe it's a couple of million, which is laughable for a big corporation. So we need to do everything as affordably as possible and with as much impact as possible. So we needed to place in a part of the world where you can get high quality talent at an affordable price, because that's the realities of the people we work for and with. So it's not because we wanted to make a big margin. That's why we're there. It's like, it's a necessity. Our model does not work if we don't have access
Otherwise,
to...
there's no business.
No.
Yeah.
So we have a pretty bad business model. Like we work with clients that doesn't have money. So like oftentimes like this big credit lines, like, we'll do the work. We know you don't have any money. We'll help you hopefully get it. And then we work for 3 to 4 months without getting paid, and then hopefully we get paid. Yeah. So there's a lot of things about what we do that doesn't make sense really on a financial angle.
Why are you into this?
I think it's the thing I'm good at. Like I'm really good at building things early stage. So I get a lot of satisfaction from that. But why we're doing it this way, I think it's because I don't think we have the authority yet to do the traditional way. Like, so if you want to build like venture studio, like American model venture studio, you need to raise, 100 million Norwegian, and you need to have a very specific industry angle. You need to be like a fund structure with a return on investment proposition, and it's a different game. And we're still young and dumb, so we can't do that.
But do you want to go in that direction, or do you want to just scale where you are?
No, we want to stay what we do now. Like we have our sort of angle into the market, which is quite unique, and we haven't really met any competitors. Well, competitors, it's not really a competitive landscape, but we haven't really met similar companies with the same model, and it's sort of working. Like we could be cash flow neutral. Some months we can be profitable. We're still building our portfolio, so it's always difficult to make a company profitable while you take a lot of risk, but we're getting there. So it's a sensible model, and there's not other people doing it that way, and it works for us. So it doesn't make sense to abandon it.
I'm also quite curious if we can sort of exemplify and make it a little bit concrete with some examples of companies you're working with but you haven't invested in, and some that you've invested in are now further down the road, so to speak.
Yeah,
if
sure.
you can give some examples.
Yeah, so again, back to my claim that I don't know how to judge people very well. I think my business partner Taj does so much, much better. It's important for us to work with companies. So oftentimes when we meet a company we think has an interesting model, we work for them and they pay us for our services. Even though it's way below market price, we build something for them.
Mm-hmm.
And then probably 1 out of 8 cases we choose to co-own something in.
Okay.
So invest some money or some sweat equity, and we take like a position in the company, 5 to 10% of the company. And then that's where we really start building. Mm-hmm. So we're like, okay, so what do you need? Like we have a company called Vive with a brilliant founder called Sarah. Like we have 12 people working on a team from our team, full time.
Yeah, that's quite a lot.
So she's a lone founder, and she's basically been able to build a high growth startup in a year, just because we can provide the firepower.
Yeah.
And sometimes the credit line when needed.
And could you, in a few sentences, just say what that company does or what they're doing?
It's a ESG strategy company, so it helps larger corporations evaluate their current sort of value chain, the way they're working, the way they should change things to be compliant and ultimately make more money. So it's like very, very, very advanced agentic solution for analyzing hundreds and thousands of pages of documentation and strategy and putting that into action internally in the organization. So it's basically what 6 consultants would spend 6 months, then Vive can do in like a month with
very,
one person.
very AI driven.
Super agentic. But like there's very, very proprietary research, documentation, and knowledge bases that the team has developed. So we have 3 professors working on our team for building.
And are those professors locally, like from Norway,
No.
or sort of globally spread across?
So me and Taj are the only people in Norway.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Everyone is, okay.
Well, of course, the founders we work with, several of them are in Norway. But
in this case, the professors are located
they're in Ethiopia.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And that was sort of one example. And for this particular company, this is one of the companies that you've invested in? Yeah. 1 out of 8 companies you work with, you invest in. But for the other 7, you are providing services for some period of time for them. And what would you say those services typically are? Or is there some patterns?
It could be technology development. Right now we're doing a lot of sales, so B2B sales. So helping them if they have an existing product, help them, do global sales, local sales. It can be help them raise capital. So we do a lot of like storytelling. That's one of the things we specialize a lot in. Like how do you tell your story in a particular way to convince investors? Like ourselves directly in Amplitude and our portfolio companies, we've onboarded, 35 investors. So we've done a lot of times. And we have a knack for doing that, telling stories in a very particular way. So it's many different things. It can be, we have customers where we do digital marketing. We have customers where we do, basically, they have a business that works, but they have never done the market research. So they can't really, get partners or investors or expand their business because they're just walking blind. So we help them do the fundamental market research, like completely from scratch. Like what market are you operating in? How are you running a business? What's the potential or the competitive landscape? So really anything from you need at an early stage startup, more or less we touch all points. Sometimes some things we're better than others, but more or less we touch most, if not all, core aspects of the business.
Is there some pattern you see in this is typically what most startups need when they come to you? Or could it be anything? I mean, is there some most struggle with this particular thing?
Well, companies need is a good founder.
Yeah, for sure.
Which very, very few have. Having people that actually has something interesting to bring to the table is almost impossible to found. And I think we can help founders that can do a decent business and we're also somewhat interested in participating. Can this person develop to be a better founder? But most cases, that's just the biggest blocker.
Founder quality.
Founder quality. Then there's difference, like people who are domain experts to become founders. So people who have had like a very core expertise in let's say a corporate setting, and then they want to start a company. That's one angle. Another one is like they're just very creative people and they've found a problem and they want to solve it. That's a different aspect. We tend to like the core experts more. I speak a lot with music industry founders, music technology, and 95% have no fucking idea what they're talking about. And it's not because I know everything, but like if there's anything that I know a lot about, it's the music industry. Not because I care about music that much. I'm just very nerdy about the industry. And I get to speak to global world leaders in the space. I have a lot of perspective and I'm really good with remembering numbers. So if there's like a number wrong, I'll call bullshit. And oftentimes the whole business is based on those numbers and they're just incorrect. So domain expertise founders are definitely the most interesting because
they know what they're talking about basically.
At least the math is correct. So, which is at the end of the day, after you've run a business for a few years, if the fundamental math was not correct, then you're going to have a problem.
What's the first thing you do when you meet a promising startup? They've gone through the first filtering. You come in. What's the thing that has the most significant impact to take on first? Pareto's law. So 20% of the efforts results in 80% of the output. So sometimes when you meet a problem, typically this is what's wrong. So if I spend my time in this particular area, I'm going to get a lot of output.
Yeah.
And I can propel this startup forwards.
So mostly it's execution. So the biggest bottleneck for most founders is you have so much things you need to do. You need to basically be a whole team by being maybe just one or two people.
Yeah.
So firepower. Yeah. So that's where we come in. We have a lot of perspectives and we've also done a lot of consultancy in the past and we also get a lot of consultancy requests. We usually say no because the quality of thought and advice might be useful, but you can get that many places. Like, you can find a lot of me's having good opinions about things that might be able to guide you. What you can't find is execution power. That's really expensive. It's really hard to find. So the impact that we do is basically filling out the gaps that founders don't have. So execution at scale. Even though we do also bring value in, let's call it the smart advice. But again, we might also be wrong. So I think there's a lot of misplaced value on insight. I think a lot of it just like, okay, have a conviction of why you do something and really do your research and then it's just doing it.
Try it out and test it.
Try it out. And if you fail, then be able to pivot fast.
Yeah, now you know.
Yeah, now you know that it's wrong. Like that's my mythology. Like I would say, again, I'm wrong 9 times out of 10. And then I've slowly built a career on being wrong right 1 times out of 10. So I think that's the mythology we apply as well.
If you look at traditional venture as well, a lot of the great venture capitalists of the world are saying, if I invest in 20 companies and one of them is right, it's going to make up for all the other 19. And this is basically sort of in line with what you're saying.
Yeah, 100%. So it's portfolio thinking. And, it's for me, I was introduced to it early through music. So it's basically the same with big music companies. Most of the major companies in Scandinavia, like Warner, Sony, Universal, across both Denmark and Norway, not so much Sweden, but like they're losing money. Like they're not making money. And most of the money they're making is just collecting, revenue of the international catalog they have.
The royalties. And
then once in a while, they have a big breakout artist. And then that might contribute to the international sort of revenue, but most of the times it's just failure. And like this illusion that you have local success. Yeah, you can have local success, but in the grand scheme of things, are they making more money than they're spending on an international level for their local repertoire? No.
Yeah.
It's really about, can you have a lot of qualified bets over time and be alive long enough to collect
before the money runs out? Yeah. This is a numbers game.
100%. So it's portfolio mindset. So we apply the same mindset. We don't need to pick a winner. We just need to pick enough potential winners and then stay alive long enough to
reap the rewards.
Yeah.
I mean, you alluded to this a little bit earlier in terms of investor readiness. You talked about storytelling being very important. Maybe there are other aspects you can speak to in terms of getting the companies that you work with sort of up to speed, ready to pitch, do a good job in pitching towards potential investors, and also speak to MVP building, minimum viable product building.
I think the biggest thing that people miss out on is clarity, and also clarity to whom. So I think there's this over-reliance on pitch capability. I think there's a much more important thing is, can you communicate something simply to a specific audience? So if you have a company how do you talk about your company to whom, and do you do so in a way that's statistically proven to be the most optimal? So I think it's just very mathematical. Pitching to investors, there's basically two paths you can take. One is of this case makes sense, and then this founder could be a wild card. And then when we work with a company, or they need to pick one of those two early stage. Like, do you want to build a company that makes sense? And you can basically say this, and this math adds up, and this is the math that we have. And therefore, we believe this could over time be good. Or it can be a founder saying, I'm going to do something crazy, and you believe that I might be able to do it.
The wild card.
The wild card, which that's the path I've always taken. Because, that's the only thing I can do, really. The rest needs to be proven over time. So, and then with building minimal viable products, this speaks to the same thing. So what's the purpose? So if you want to go through the charismatic founder approaches, can you prove that you have the capability of building something in that direction? And for the mathematical founder, it's like, I can build something that can showcase that this math makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's all about the narrative and to whom are you speaking to.
You have the podcast Sound Connections you mentioned earlier. You started about 2 years ago. It's been very successful so far, more than 140 episodes. Maybe you can speak to the strategic choices you made early on in terms of outreach and production efficiency.
Yeah.
And sort of how it links perhaps into Amplitude Ventures.
One of the most important things for me was I don't have a lot of time. I have more time now than I've had before. So I needed to be effective, and I've always been a person to explore things first. So I chose, I want to do a podcast about being a founder in the music industry. And then I invited sort of the people that I knew would respond positively, but still had some status in the music industry.
Yeah.
And I just built on that. But then for technology, I said, how can I be the most effective? So this is 2.5 years ago. So consumer AI products were not that far. It was still like a ChatGPT 3. But I was thinking, what kind of prompts? So I studied prompt engineering. How can I make sure that the episode descriptions are sort of semi-generated and feed it with training, like previous things, and how do I edit faster? So like whenever like a beta of, I think Autopod came out, like it was really rough, bad technology. Can it edit the video quickly? And so I went from, starting to do it to I could probably produce a full episode, post-production, like thumbnails, episode descriptions, video editing, like 2.5 hours myself. And then now it's effective enough. So probably after 15 episodes, then I handed over to one of my employees to do it. And then he took over. And those early days, I was like really searching out for efficiency. And that also led to, for example, I was just playing around with like AI and ended up launching the first AI podcast host in the world.
Yeah, this is the AI Jake.
AI Jake, yeah. So I don't do that anymore.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah, so it's basically, so the podcast was growing. I was getting bigger and bigger guests. I've been always pretty good at networking, so I had a decent quality network that I reached out to strategically as guests came on and I could reference to them. As like, I want to effectivize things. And I was talking with, actually weirdly so, I was talking with the manager of Ice-T, so the big American rapper.
Oh, really?
And then he had an idea like, hey, can't you do something with like automated music news? And I'm like, nah, I don't think that's a good idea, but let me explore that path. And I found this company called, I forgot the name now, I think it's called Vapi or something like that, which is basically a phone support company.
Okay.
And like, this sounds interesting. And I logged in and like, like this API connection you can do.
Yeah.
And like, and I know 11 Labs, so I cloned my voice. I took this thing. HeyGen had just came out.
Yeah.
So connecting the APIs together and like, can I speak to myself if I make a really good system prompt? And it ended up like, I set up a phone line with this sort of telephone company.
Okay.
And then suddenly I was speaking with myself because I cloned my voice and connected through API and like, I'm speaking with myself right now. And then I just perfected that and then so let's do a podcast episode. And ended up being like the first in the world to do a live podcast episode with my AI version. So we had a lot of coverage like NRK, Daily Mail, international media. So I haven't been challenged yet. It seems to still to this day to be the first AI podcast globally in the world.
It was a really fun thing to do and a really fun way to explore all this new technology that's cropping up at the same time. I really love the idea
Yeah.
of playing around with technology and creating something like that, and just exploring the possibilities, just swimming in this ocean of technology.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So I'm semi-technical in the sense that I know technology fairly well. I don't code per se, but I know how to navigate that space really well. So again, just that creativity. So I just saw an opportunity that other people didn't, and even to this day, like not a lot of people have done it. I've shown a few people how to do it, but like it's still not that obvious.
Do you involve different people from Amplitude Ventures that's in this project, or did you do a lot of it yourself? I mean, it seems like a lot of things to glue together.
I always do things by myself first. So I always explore fully myself. And then if it has something sustainability, I hand it over. Like even like we created the first AI artist in Norway. So I released the first music with AI artist in Norway, got a good deal, media coverage.
Yeah, what would you call it?
Well, it was a company called Russelorta. So we did so we also had NRK coverage and that kind of stuff on the first AI music with like a Russebus and stuff like that.
Did you make like a music video for it as well?
No, we just made music, and then because like it spent so much, like I needed to, in order to come to a quality that was release ready, I think I've made like 5,000 songs.
What did you say? 5,000?
5,000, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so
that's
it's
a lot.
like the hyperfocus was so deep that like this cannot be repeated, even if I try to train people. Like
too deep of a rabbit hole.
Yeah, and we tried to launch it as business, but we couldn't really find like any reliable partners. So we had like people we tested out like to do the selling and stuff like that, but it's a weird industry. There was a music industry.
Yeah, that's for sure. But I was just thinking, from the story, extrapolating to sort of music in general. And did you use Suno or what kind of tool?
Yeah, so I ended up always been preferring Suno, even when it was crap. You could do a lot of creative things. Like, right now they have a lot of, creativity, but even like when you did Suno 2 and Suno 3, like it was really limited what you can do. But as I have a master's in audio production, like I was really creative and like took things out of Suno, put it together, put it back in, and like prompt engineering and like was really, really creative. Like I could make something. So Suno was the most, basically I used Suno because it could give output the fastest.
Yeah.
So a lot of the other programs, like you need to wait for a long time and I just needed rapid iterations. Like
it also feels a little bit more I haven't explored this space a lot. I'm sure you've explored it much more, but it feels much more intuitive than a lot of the alternatives. It's very easy to make something, and it seems to be able to understand more which direction you're going in, at least for the ones that I've tried.
It's just better on quality. There's a lot of downsides for that. There's a lot of illegal activity of how they built it, and that's a story for a different day. But for me, they've been the biggest disruptors, also because they've been the ones getting the most capital. They just raised 2.5 billion Norwegian last week in extra capital. So they're really getting heavily financed to build this very disruptive technology, and no one can beat them on quality. But it's done illegally, so
Oh, really? I was not aware of that part of it.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's a big controversy.
I'm sort of dying to dive into that, but maybe that's a topic for another day.
Sure, but music is being disrupted, and I've worked in music, most of my adult life, and for me, it's interesting to see something so core and fundamental to people's lives, which is music and their relationship with music and their relationships where music is a defining part of it.
Yeah.
We've already now come to a point where AI music outperforms most creators. And I can say that very honestly. Like, I've made songs, I'll play you one afterwards,
sure.
which you'll actually hear, like how, if you do it right, and I've, I think by now made more than 10,000 songs with these kind of tools, you can really get good music. Like they can hit you emotionally.
With LLMs, you can play around with the lyrics so much. You can play around with the different instruments. Like everything is fine, but I want to change this instrument to this, so I want to have a different sound. Like the ability to customize and get new results very quickly is just mind-boggling.
We're almost there where creativity can be fully sort of expressed in AI tools. And that's scary. I talk a lot with guests on my podcast about this, and everything from world leaders in this space in like music. So last episode with Epidemic Sound, which arguably is probably the biggest production music company in the world, like 15 billion Norwegian valuation. And they have an opinion about AI music, which is very sensible, that it's not going to take over. But then you have professors I speak with that believe it's going to take over everything. And then you have philosophers I speak with that explains the complexity of the human mind and body and how that sort of does not resonate with machines. So no one really knows where it's going.
It's difficult to say.
It's super difficult to say, yeah.
I heard Elon say in an interview earlier this week that with so much of, let's call it basic services going to AI, and it's so fast and easy to use these tools, what you're left with is the live experience. That's the only thing that you can't copy that easy. You can create movies, you can create pictures, you can create music, you can create all these different things. But the one thing you can't create is being there physically, in body, having that live experience. So one of his thoughts was that the price of tickets to live events, be it a live podcast, be it a live concert, be it a live, a theater group or whatever it is, but being there, like the price of being there is going to rise as the price drops for not being there, all the digital aspects. And I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I definitely, believe that the demand for human interaction is going to rise, and we're already seeing this across the field. I'm skeptical to that not also being disrupted to some degree. I think the expression of human connection is going to be different. But I do believe that the human connectivity and physical presence is going to matter a lot more than it's done in the past. But in reality, I think it's going to change more than people think. And in some aspects, it's going to just change less than people think. I try to not spend too much time reflecting on it because I now know so much that I know nothing.
The more you know, the more you realize that you don't know.
And I've come to this point where I've spoken to, some of the most progressive minds on music on this field, and they all disagree.
Mm-hmm.
So they not all completely disagree, but, most of them disagree to some degree. And I think that's just put me in a position like, then I'm not going to have an opinion. I'll just ride along. I can't contribute to the conversation. I can't contribute to the movement either. So I'll be an observer that will be as informed as I can to try to make money when I can, because ultimately that's sort of my business.
Yeah, and flexible to change and adapt according to whatever happens rather than trying to predict what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Or at least not spend too much time trying to predict. Another thing I've seen that's just related to this, I wanted to mention that speaking about live events, there's also been some concerts having the artist not being there. So it's a hologram having the concert. So it's also a fascinating concept that probably will happen more.
I think, the people's connection to digital characters have always been strong. Like everything from when I was a kid and watching Dragon Ball Z.
Cartoons and...
Yeah, so that's always going to be there. It's always going to... I think that's going to grow also. Like I think as sort of AI or entities taking form of AI or is going to have more personality and more to say and more relevance. So that aspect is also going to grow. So I think that's something we're going to see as well, that as long as you have good stories, like the characters in Dragon Ball Z are not real, but you can still have diehard fans that, that's what captures them. And that's going to happen with holograms and AI artists as well.
Absolutely.
And I don't think there's any difference, even though it seems more scary.
Yeah, it's just going to be even more sophisticated in terms of the ways that they connect and resonate with you.
At the end of the day, if you tell a great story, no matter what medium you use, there will be a market for it.
And speaking about sort of memorable connections, on the podcast, you've had a lot of conversations. What would you say, or is there something that comes to mind that's incredibly or most inspiring or insightful or memorable founder story that you've come across so far? That's something that sort of stands out to you, which maybe we can learn something from.
I think, the biggest revelation, which I've always known, and, as the more that I talk with people, the more true it is everything is shit when it comes to the founder journey. Like there's moments of good, but the rest is just resilience. Like it's, from speaking with founders who I deeply admire. I had a really interesting conversation with a guy called Scott Cohen. People who's not in the music industry would not know who he is, but he's a very progressive entrepreneur, and he basically built the first digital distribution of music. So the people who distribute music to iTunes as the first company, that was like The Orchard. So a New York-based company.
Yeah.
And he was in $3 million personal debt and had built the company for 7 years before digitalization broke through. Like he had a, I'll have my own opinion, like a terrible founder journey, like the most awful thing you can imagine. And he ended out on the other side and made a decent return on investment, but still it was like early days. So, not comparable to the effort put into it. Just across the board, like I rarely ever hear any founder stories where I thought, oh, that could be nice. Like it's all pretty much like over the top misery over a prolonged period of time. And then I think my own reflection of that is like, how do I find just enjoyment in the work then? Because I know the default is going to be shit. And, if I ask my wife, she asks me on a weekly basis, like, why do you continue doing this? And that's just, I found pleasure in the work, even though it's, 90% shit.
Celebrate the small wins.
Yeah, I don't even do
when
that.
You can.
I just accept that that's how it is. And then I enjoy that I have freedom. I enjoy that, I don't have a boss. Well, I have a chairman.
Yeah, flexibility in how to spend your time.
And, work with things I'm passionate about. I'm, completely underpaid and everything. But like, it's a trade-off. Like I would definitely say I'm happy, even though it's really rough.
There's this saying that being an entrepreneur or running a startup rather, or being a founder is like eating glass and staring into the abyss. And I think there's a lot to that.
It definitely feels like that. And I don't think it's an exaggeration. Like I really think that is.
It's also tough with this emotional roller coaster, like even just intraday, just within one day, you can be on the top of the world and at the rock bottom maybe two, 3 times during just one day. So I think it's emotionally very straining.
That happens on a daily basis almost, that I feel like, like this is depressing. And then a few hours after, you just like, you found a solution and there's something else good that happened. And you just try to focus on that.
Yeah.
But it is like literally, for most people, this would be the worst job ever. By far. Like it is terrible in most like neutral metrics.
In terms of advice, what's the best advice you've picked up so far on music tech or tech startups?
I think it's a new advice. Like I try to not surround me with a lot of advice, actually. And the reason for that is I know that no one knows. Like it's just foresight is very few people have that luxury. I always have like one mentor. Mm-hmm. Like it can change every 6-12 months, but I always have like one person I speak to, not a lot, but that I choose to trust.
That's interesting.
And right now, one of who's recently invested in that company, he's called Jonas. He's a exited music tech founder. And he has this saying that is, you got to do what you got to do. And that's the best advice I have currently. It's just like, you just got to do what you got to do. Like it's, yes, your neck was shit and you don't want to do something, but like if that's what you got to do, then you got to do it. So it's a very practical advice that I me and Taj try to live from right now. It's like, that sucks, but
yeah, let's not procrastinate it. Let's just do it, get it done, and then
yeah, I mean, if that's, letting some of the team go or like, walking away from a deal you can make a lot of money on, but long term that's going to hurt you and like all these kind of things. So you just got to do what you got to do. So that's what sort of resonates the most with me right now.
It's interesting, speaking about mentorship, how do you go about mentorship? Like what works for you in terms of how do you find them and how do you do it? Like, do you have a weekly call or how do you sort of structure it?
Yeah, I've always been quite lucky because I have like an inherent charisma. I've always had that I've always been able to get a hold of people that are, steps way ahead of me. So everything from people working with like global icons or like had, global leading careers. And that's been pretty much since I've been 18. I've been able to get a hold of these people and they tend to seem like it's worth investing in me. So it's sort of happenstance I find people. And then if there's a combination of, I believe they have something to give and they're willing to give something, then I usually maybe on average, I talk with like a mentor figure like maybe 2 times a month, like for half an hour. Okay. Something like that. It's rarely advice more than perspective and reflection and being devil's advocate on a thought.
Yeah.
Yeah. But again, I tend to not to take too much advice. Like it's often noise. One of the big issues I see with founders is they have like 4 advisors on their company and like, why are you listening to so many people? Like, do you really trust that other people know better than you? Might be true, but historically speaking, no one knows.
I like also resonates very well with me in terms of like sparring and being devil's advocate for each other, just playing different roles, like having someone to talk to. I mean, it could be a friend, it could be a business partner, it could be someone in the industry, it could be a lot of things, but having someone to throw a ball with, just play around, and then afterwards you feel maybe, okay, I've structured my thoughts a little bit better, and now I know what to do. Like that sort of thing, really, I really like that.
Decluttering the ideas and thoughts. Yeah. So I think it's important to have these people in your life, but it's also important not to over-rely on them.
Circling back to AI, given all the progress and all the advances and what you've seen so far, people you've talked to on the podcast, what would you say are the new possibilities that are enabled by AI technology in terms of how music is created, shared, sold, that you're currently most excited about, that you feel like, wow, this is going to be awesome how this plays out?
In all honesty, there's not a lot of things I'm excited about. More because it's unknown what it is. But one thing I am actually excited about is when you have movies, you have these very visionary directors, and they need a whole crew to execute on that, which is probably not going to change anytime soon. But music is a tiny bit of a different beast. So you're going to have more creators that are holistic, that has an artistic vision, both visually, storytelling, music-wise, show, and basically these, wonder kid type personas, and they're going to express itself more and more. Where people who, maybe in the past needed also just navigate relationships and, win-wins and lose-lose and all this sort of navigation with bureaucracy in the industry, where they're going to have a much shorter path to be able to execute themselves.
Yeah.
So you're going to have these much more clear, single-minded storytellers that just have something very specific they want to express and can execute on it. And I love that. So I think a few good examples is like Lauv, if you know him, like a American artist that did this a few years ago, like basically alone, write the songs, produce the songs, sing the songs, perform live. Maybe less so like Ed Sheeran, but still like that can work holistically. Yeah. Or Charlie Puth, is a good example.
Oh, his guy is fantastic. Phenomenal
Jakob
guy.
Collier. So there's a lot of these creators that will have more opportunity to self-express with technology, and we're going to see more of those, which I think are ultimately oftentimes the most interesting artists.
And I love the idea of distance from thought or idea to result being shorter. Just being able to materialize whatever's in your mind and get it out there, and then see how it plays out, maybe get some feedback, and then reiterate, make something new.
Yeah.
Just shorten the feedback loop, shorten the iteration loop.
Also, and I think there's going to be there's going to be a bigger gap. So one of my big sorrows is seeing people pursuing music when they shouldn't be, in my book. Like, it's great that you love making music, but you're never going to freaking make it. And I think that's going to be more evident with technology. The playing field is going to be more leveled, and the people who should be expressing themselves will be expressing themselves more clearly. And the people who shouldn't be, or like, a person who's been studying their instrument for 15 years but really doesn't have anything to say, they're going to be filtered out more quickly, which I ultimately think is a good thing, because I've seen the dark side of that moon. I have seen, like, wouldn't call it friends, but like colleagues or people I know that, spent 15 years pursuing a dream, and then they need to abandon it. And then I could maybe claim in the first place, like, you really hadn't anything to give in the first place, but happy you spent 15 years pursuing that, which you probably shouldn't have had. So I think there's a lot of sorrow in that, and it's not because of that I want to discourage people to pursue their dreams, but like, let's be realistic first. Are you unique? If not, maybe do something else.
This is a great perspective, because it really speaks back to the feedback loop. Since the feedback loop is so much shorter, you don't have to, wander in the desert for 15 years wondering, will this resonate with people? Will this make sense or not?
Yeah.
Because very often, it could also be a mix of, people procrastinating rather than really giving it their all to see if it works. But you can make, if you really want to do something, you can make the feedback loop so short that you can figure it out, and then you don't suffer the alternative cost. What could I have spent all these years, all this effort on instead?
life at the end of the day is also practical. Like, I think there's time for youth and ambition. And I think there's relevance in pursuing a single-minded pursuit for some time. But I think ultimately there's other things in life that can also provide joy, even for a dreamer, which is, relevance, where I think a lot of people miss out on that. Are you relevant for the industry, the people around you, for kids in the future? Are you a relevant provider?
We spoke about AI Jake earlier, this avatar that you created. Do you use him today?
No, for me, I'm very like, does this give value? And that gave value from a branding PR perspective. But no, it doesn't give value anymore. So again, I move on fairly quickly. But I still have a lot of people, so AI Jake. And so people are still reacting to it, but no. I have had a few other experiments that are sort of in a similar lane, something that's also really, really cool, but I just haven't launched because I couldn't find the scalable value. So I do a lot of these experiments, less so the last year, but most of the times I have like a side project going on. Like right now, I'm not going to release it, but like I have this side project that's really, really interesting, which is also music related, is basically one of the next steps of AI Jake. So I used to be a songwriter producer. My biggest hurdle was that I wasn't a good enough instrumentalist to do a lot of things myself. So I needed people around me to help me do it, which was too costly.
Yeah.
I've written a whole album with like AI tools, like spent a lot of time on it, really a lot of time, like with lyrics and basically making music. And then I found a team to reproduce the tracks, almost exactly like AI. So you can actually, legally speaking, own the master rights. And then I've made voice clones of myself, so singing voice clones of myself, which is a 1-to-1. Because I myself have released through 2 albums and 3 EPs in the past. They're hidden on the internet. You're not going to find them. But so I have a lot of like tracks of my voice. So we've cloned my voice in an AI model.
So you can train it on
yeah,
that,
and then we take these AI songs with these vocals and we take and strip it out from all effects and we just basically transform that AI vocal to my vocal. So it's basically like a test project I've done called Yamin, where it's basically my AI Jake that's singing my songs, but the creation method has been fundamentally different. So I have that out there. I can also show you something after the podcast.
Yeah, that would be fun.
So it's basically, you can hear me singing things that I've never sung in my life, but it's a 1-to-1 replica of my singing style and voice. And
in terms of the instruments, could you speak to that as well? Like if you, on your record, you would want someone to, I don't know, play the trumpet and one guy to play bass and one play to play a certain kind of guitar?
I've never cared much about the specifics of music. So for me, it's more like I spend a lot of time creating productions that has the vibe. I am not too interested about the specifics. So like, is this the vibe I'm going for? Is this the textural music atmosphere? Is this the grid I want? So I think more like those. I'm less so of a producer from a specific angle. I'm much more like a holistic producer. So I don't concern myself with that.
Okay, yeah.
Obviously, I try to prompt myself into similarities between the tracks. So the album I've made, like they all sound similar-ish with a similar instrumentation. It gets very technical how you can do that, but you can basically create compositions and then you can recreate the productions and then you can force them into soundscapes and like it's, advanced process of how you, it's not straightforward.
Yeah. But basically you're not focusing on like I want this instrument rather than this instrument. You're focusing on like the soundscape itself rather.
Yeah, the reference point.
Is that the way of understanding it?
Yeah. It's the texture. Yeah.
So it's, I guess we could call it vibe producing rather than vibe coding.
Yeah, you can to a degree compare it like that. Yeah, sure.
I guess in my mind, knowing very little about this industry, I would imagine that quite a lot of people would want to do something like that. I guess we're going a little bit back to what we talked about earlier. Like a lot of people would probably in the next couple of years try to do something similar, probably fail, but I think a lot of people would want to try it.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't know what they want to say. I think, that's a lifelong pursuit. Like, what do you have to say? What value does it bring? And do you actually have something on your heart that you know how to steer something towards expressing? And I think that's where most people will fail.
Yeah,
so,
that's probably true.
Yeah, and that's not demeaning anyone. It's just like that's a skill in itself. Like,
yeah.
What do you have to bring to the world? How do you express it specifically so it's true to you? That pursuit takes decades.
I think a lot of people probably don't think about it through that lens. which is a necessary lens, but I think that's where it's coming from. A lot of people have like some idea of the kind of music that they would personally like to hear. And I don't think about it in terms of like, what's the emotion I'm trying to create? What is the story I'm trying to tell?
Because, stories are not one-off things. It's consistency over time. It's coherent storytelling that has many different angles. Like a great artist is not because they've made one song. It's because they are true to their approach over decades. Like that's what defines great artists. So a one-off story doesn't define a good story. That's the
one-hit wonder.
Yeah, no. It doesn't work, and it's never worked like that. So the beauty about storytelling is it doesn't happen in isolation. It happens continuously. And that's a great storyteller. People misunderstand that.
Not portfolio thinking, but in a way. I mean, you have all the different albums in your discography, sort of, and then you tell a story within the album, but also across the albums.
That's the point I never came to with my own music. Like, it was, random. It was in the moment, which is fine. That's a part of my journey. But that's also, I would never, even though I've released music, I've performed a lot and sung a lot, I don't see myself as a music artist, just because I've never come to that point of continuous storytelling where I can, with more confidence, say that I'm an entrepreneur, because that's something I've consistently done over time, and that's my full expression of myself. But I would love to do music again, but I'm not going to do it.
Yeah, you can't do it all at once, I guess. No. Got to focus to make a difference. Bringing in AI Jake a little bit more, like what would you say, playing around with AI Jake, both in terms of the podcast, in terms of the music, as you mentioned now, what would you say that's like the experience and the learnings from playing around with AI Jake and building that sort of thing has taught you about where the music and the tech industry as a whole is heading?
Well, the biggest thing is, if you want to replicate something, there needs to be an underlying value first.
Yeah.
So if I weren't a good singer, which I would say I am, I wouldn't be able to make a good voice clone.
Yeah.
If I didn't have decent podcast with a special tone of voice, I wouldn't be able to make a convincing AI model. So for me, it's like, is there something in the base? And it's not like it needs to be expressed potential over time that you then can replicate. There's value there, which is, how AI works, is you need to have training data that makes sense.
Yeah, both having the right training data, but also having the taste to know where you're going, where you want to take this.
That's a really important thing. You need to have a reference point to, is this cool or not? Does this give value or not? Which is really difficult, and also like a joker, really. Like, even the best tastemakers don't really necessarily know what future taste there will be. It's kind of like a wild card as well.
Both thinking about the different companies that you invest in and also interact with through Amplitude Ventures, but also thinking about sort of yourself as a creator through podcasting and all the other outlets you've had. What do you think is the fastest way for creators, different kinds of creators, to negotiate sustainable partnerships? Because you've done quite a lot of that in different capacities over the years. Is there some advice or some learnings that people earlier in their journey could maybe learn from?
I think take it as far as you can yourself. There is so little money to be had, both in entrepreneurship and in music. And if you bring in too many people too early, whatever potential you will live out needs to be separated in so many pieces of the pie that there's nothing left. So it's the brutal truth, and it's the uncomfortable truth, that you can only share it with that many, and make sure that you take care of yourself first, because you need sustainability in order to provide value over time. So if you're a person that needs a lot of help, maybe it's not for you, which is kind of brutal, but the reality. So be able to do it yourself very, very far is probably the best way to do it currently, and probably also in the future.
We've spoken quite a bit about the network. I mean, you have this capacity of building network that has helped you in most of the areas that we've spoken about so far. Is there something to be said or something to I mean, some things are maybe an inherent skill, but is there something that can be shared in terms of learnings of how to accelerate a network or accelerate building connections? Something that people listening in can maybe learn from in their pursuits to build their network?
For me, networking is transactional, but transactional in the format that I need to, in most cases, try to make the investment. So I need to have capacity to give value and then accept that, 19 out of 20 times I'm not going to get anything from that. So that is, meeting with founders, giving advice, being generous. My version of generous is incredibly blunt. I just say my opinion about your thing, take it or leave it. So for me, I try to do that at scale, and then I try to, if possible, give value and not expect anything in return. That's quite effective networking. And then if also relentlessness, if there's some value to be had for someone and you also believe there's a mutual benefit, then just being really, really in pursuit of that. So most of the partners I've had, like most of the partners and investors we have in our company, they said no. And then I just pursued them like crazy. Some has been much easier. So
not take no for an answer.
Yeah, knowing who to pursue, and then most of the time just trying to provide value. And for me, having a transactional mindset actually helps. Not to sort of forfeit and abandon the notion of relationships, but I think a lot of people miss out a lot of opportunities because they nurture too many relationships. Like, you need to be transactional at scale, and then having some sort of sense of this person is worth my time and my relationship, and this person is not.
I would also help, I guess, to be able to handle rejection quite easily, or in a good way, because it's a numbers game and there will be a lot of rejection.
Most of the time it's rejection, and you just learn to sort of accept that. And it's not even, for me, like, rejections rarely have any impact because that's just the default. Like, I'm definitely rejected less these days than before, just because I have more authority. But it's the biggest part of what you do if you want to grow something.
On this thread of learning, I think a lot of people want to create something, to build something. They have something in their mind, and maybe they have a side quest, passion project that they want to turn into something, a scalable venture. If you were to devise like a framework or a blueprint or some ideas, like how to turn it into a reality.
All good things takes time. I don't think there's any such thing as a quick success. And if anything, it's because you've hit a trend. Yeah. Well, if you want a quick validation, I think I actually don't have good advice on that. Like, I just don't see it. Like, I hear stories of it, but it's not something I meet in my everyday life. Like, nothing is easy, nothing is fast. Like, that's my default approach to most things in life.
Yeah.
Again, when I'm taking up running now, like, I've been running for soon 1.5 years, and then I've taken it seriously for 4 months. Like, even on my Strava, I for fun wrote, which I think is funny, is like, Norwegian champion 2031. Like, it's not because I believe I'm going to be that, but like, for me, it's just like a reminding myself that, if I want to do this, I got to run for 6 years. Like, it's nothing is cheap, nothing is easy. And if you, for some reason, are lucky to have something cheap and easy, I doubt it's going to happen again. Like, it's,
then it's more luck.
Yeah. So, my math teacher in high school said, like, you need to ignore the statistical outliers. And that's always stuck with me. Like, it's just like, if there's a statistical outlier, don't count it. It's not an actual story. And I try to live that in my life. Like, if anything is shiny and a statistical outlier, it's like, cool, great story. That's not real life.
Yeah.
And it might happen to me at one point that I'll have a statistical outlier, and then I'll be happy for that. But, you can't rely on it.
As a podcaster, you've sort of accelerated your journey quite a bit. Is there some learnings or some techniques or some workflows maybe that others could take on who are maybe finding themselves in a different position than you are currently with Amplitude Ventures, having these teams that could support you? But are there some aspects of this that they could incorporate?
There's 3 ways of working I've done in the past where I'm currently doing one of those. So one is doing something quick, fast, and maybe low quality. One is doing very slow and high quality, and one is doing good enough. And I'm a big believer in good enough.
Yeah.
I don't believe it's the best path always, but I think it's a consistent path. For tools and automation, like, how can I be smart enough to use tools and automation and techniques to get something that's good enough? And then just make sure that I can do it a lot over time. And then I can do baby steps. I can become a better interviewer. I can be more honest. I can, but even, the podcast, like, technically speaking, nothing has involved for, like, I found a model at episode 10. That's what we're using now. There's no difference.
Yeah.
And because that's not the defining factor. Now it's just, that's good enough. And then, like, yeah, we improve the music once in a while. We improve some things, thumbnails once in a while. But it's basically just my interview technique and my credibility that just increases step by step. And that's good enough. So I could also try to become a professional podcaster. That would be a totally different pursuit. But for what I need this to be, which is basically branding, network, credibility, good enough is good enough. And I'm never going to be a person that goes all in on something and be a perfectionist, and just because it's not how I'm put together. But I have friends who are perfectionists and build slowly and have become global success. So that's also a path you can take. It just doesn't fit me.
We've spoken about how difficult it is to have opinions of what's going to happen in the future. Nobody knows. If you were to take a guess from what you've learned so far, what would be a valuable skill, you think, moving forwards to acquire? And how could you maybe acquire that skill fast as well?
So the most important skill that I can see right now is curation. So when creativity and expression and output is at your fingertip, how can you curate the best? How can you have clarity on your vision and just use all those moving pieces to tell one narrative?
Yeah.
So I believe in music, I believe in tech, I believe in entrepreneurship. That's where the primary skill set lies. Again, back to the movie director. So that is the persona that I believe will succeed the most in the age of AI, is the curator.
The curator.
So the people who have that skill set, in my book, will win.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, man.
How can people reach out? How can people find you online?
LinkedIn is a great place. Try to be online there. I think that's the primary space right now. Obviously, go listen to the podcast. It's going to be super boring unless that's your sort of focus. So, LinkedIn, I post good stuff. I try to be available there.
So that's the primary source, yeah?
Yeah, currently, yeah.
All right. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you, man.
If you appreciated that, then click here for more content like this. Go on. Click it. And don't forget to subscribe. Be well.